In this video, I want to talk about the value of knowledge. Now, the previous video was about the value of true belief, and so in order for there to be any difference between these two videos, there should be a difference between, on the one hand, true belief, and on the other hand, knowledge. Now, epistemologists, since at least Plato, have contended that there is indeed a difference, that just having a true belief is not the same as having knowledge. And we can illustrate this very simply with an example. So suppose that I have a belief that I just believe because I feel like believing it. It was just a hunch, right? I didn't have any good observations, any good reasons for believing it. So, without having any confirmation of this at all, I wake up and I think, you know what, it's probably rainy outside. Right? I didn't hear the rain, I didn't read the weather report, I just believe it. Oh, it's raining outside. I open the window, I open the curtains, I look out, it's raining. Well, does that mean that I knew that it was raining before I opened the curtain? Well, I had a true belief, right? But I didn't have any reasons for that belief. And so it seems mere luck that the belief was true rather than false. And epistemologists have almost universally tended to say that this means that I didn't have knowledge, right? That knowledge is something more than true belief, or something different from true belief, but that having true belief is not enough for having knowledge. So here are two very influential attempts to explain what the difference between true belief on the one hand and knowledge on the other hand is. And we'll see them in more detail in later videos, but I just want to briefly introduce them now. One of these is the so-called justified true belief analysis of knowledge. So it's an analysis of knowledge that tells us that knowledge is not true belief, but justified true belief. And we can think of that as being true belief with good reasons. Right? So if I believe something and it's true and I have good reasons for it, then it's knowledge. Okay. So that's one attempt to account for the difference between knowledge and knowledge and true belief. Another attempt to do that is called reliabilism. And reliabilism tells us that something is knowledge if it's a true belief that I gained through a reliable method. And so, for instance, if I'm trying to gain some knowledge about whether it's raining outside, then looking outside is probably a reliable method, right? And just believing the first thing that pops into my head, not a reliable method. So both of these accounts, one which says that you need good reasons, the other says that you need to have used a reliable method, are accounts that try to explain what the difference is between just having true belief on the one hand and having real knowledge on the other hand. Now, whether those two accounts are really good as accounts of knowledge is something we'll talk about in later videos. But right now, I want to ask the question, suppose that something like this is true, why should we care about knowledge? Right? Why do we have epistemology, a field that is dedicated to knowledge, in which we ask questions like what is knowledge, how can we get knowledge, can we get knowledge, and so on and so forth, rather than a field which is just about belief, right? A field which is about true belief, maybe. A field of philosophy which cares about true belief but doesn't care about knowledge. What's so good about knowledge? What is the value of knowledge? Well, here is something a useful metaphor that I get from the epistemologist Linda Zagzebski. So what Zagzebski does in this analogy, she says, well, you can think maybe of knowledge, especially on an account of something like reliabilism, which says that knowledge is true belief that was generated by a reliable method. You can think of knowledge as a cup of espresso coffee, right? And you can think of the method as the espresso machine. And now, so what is generated by the method is true belief, right? That's the cup of espresso. And it's a true belief, so it's a nice, good, valuable cup of espresso. And now suppose that somebody comes to you and says, yeah, but it's not just a good cup. This cup is actually made better by the fact that it was created by a good machine. Because this machine is very reliable. And you say, well, what does it mean to be reliable? So, well, reliable means that very often when you press the button, it creates a cup of espresso. And only rarely does it create a cup of hot water. That's a little bit what reliabilism is like, right? A reliable method is a method that usually generates true beliefs and only rarely generates false beliefs. So if knowledge is reliably produced true belief, and if reliably produced true belief is supposed to be better than mere true belief, right, than true belief that wasn't maybe reliably produced, then somehow the fact that the production was reliable is supposed to add value to the true belief. And now Zagzebski, with her analogy of an espresso machine, says, well, look, suppose you get a cup of espresso coffee. Right? Why do you care whether it comes from a machine which often produces espresso coffee or a machine that only rarely produces espresso coffee? Right? I mean, given that you got the espresso coffee, you're happy, right? And you don't care about the machine. Given that you got a true belief, you're happy. And why would you care whether this method that you used also succeeds in other instances? Right? That might be far from clear. Right? That would be just as unclear as if somebody said, you know, this cup of espresso is very valuable because it was made by a very expensive machine. Like, well, who cares about the machine, right? I mean, I only care about the cup of espresso. And maybe we can say something like that about the justified true belief analysis as well, right? I mean, okay, I want a true belief. I mean, maybe good reasons help me get to true beliefs, right? Maybe if I have good reasons, I more often get to a true belief. But given that I now have a true belief, why should I care about that? Right? Why should I care about how I got the true belief as long as I got it? How could it be made more valuable by how it was produced or by the quality of the arguments that led to it? I mean, isn't the truth what I wanted? So that is the basically the problem that people posit when they posit the problem of the value of knowledge. Right? When we think about knowledge, and when we think about what we add in order to get knowledge rather than true belief, that might seem to be something like good arguments, or it might seem to be something like a reliable method. And on the one hand, good arguments and a reliable method seem pretty good. I mean, if somebody says, I've used good arguments, you go, you did well. If somebody says, I've used a reliable method, you say, you did well. Whereas on the other hand, if somebody says, I used some really bad arguments, or I've used a really unreliable method, you're like, whoa. But okay, I mean, we feel good about that. But if we look at the end product, right? If we look at the belief itself, that is the end product, and we see that the belief is true, isn't that all that we want? Right? Don't we have exactly what we want once we have a true belief? Didn't we say in an earlier video that truth is the good of belief? That the aim that we're striving towards is the truth. And if that's right, then it seems, at least at first sight, that knowledge isn't any better than true belief. Right? Because true belief is just exactly what we want. That's what's intrinsically valuable. Right? And knowledge, okay, maybe it adds some nice extras, like good arguments, but in the end, that's not really what we're here for. We're here for the truth. So, I've tried to explain, as solidly as I can maybe, the so-called value problem for knowledge. Now, how can we answer the value problem for knowledge? I want to talk about two possible answers to it. One which you see pretty often in the literature and which I personally don't think works. And then I'll tell you what my preferred solution to the value problem is. But of course, as always, you are here to make up your own mind, and there are going to be other answers than only the two that I'm going to give you right here. So here, an argument or an answer that you see a lot in the literature. It's an answer that people connect to Plato. And I'll connect it to Plato too. And we'll talk also a little bit about how it actually connects to the real sort of thing that Plato is saying. So Plato in the Meno, which is one of his dialogues, the Meno, is worried about this distinction between true belief and knowledge, and why one would be more valuable than the other. And Plato brings in a sort of analogy, and he talks about the statues of Daedalus. The statues of Daedalus. And he says, the statues of Daedalus are so lifelike that unless you chain them to the ground or to something else, I don't know, they'll run away. Right? And maybe he is recalling a sort of myth where these statues were like real and they actually ran away. Or maybe he's just sort of jokingly explaining that these statues are so beautiful and valuable that if you just put them outside your house in the front garden, somebody's going to steal them. But either way, the idea is that those statues, unless they're chained down, they're just going to disappear. And they're not going to be very valuable for you because you're going to lose them. But only if they're chained down, then they're valuable for you, right? And then the suggestion is that mere true belief is like a statue that isn't chained down, but knowledge, and Plato would say, knowing when you have the reason why, that really ties down your belief in such a way that you won't lose it, and that makes it much more valuable for you. And the way that certain contemporary epistemologists, epistemologists living right now, have explained this Platonic analogy is they say, well, it works like this, right? If you have good reasons, for instance, for your beliefs, or if you have used some kind of reliable method, then there won't be a lot of circumstances in which you have to give up your belief, right? If I believe that there's orange juice in the fridge because I recall having bought it yesterday and put it in the fridge myself, okay, then if my wife enters the room and I say, is there any orange juice in the fridge? She says, no, I don't think so. I didn't see any. That's not going to make me drop my true belief because I think, maybe she just didn't look very well, but I recall having put it in there, right? And so my belief that there's orange juice in the fridge is kind of stable. I need a lot of evidence before I'm going to give it up. Whereas if I just believe that there's orange juice in the fridge on a whim, I think, well, there's probably orange juice in the fridge. Then if my wife says this, I think, well, maybe there's not orange juice in the fridge. And I lose my true belief very easily. Okay, so that's a way, I don't think this is what Plato says, but that's something that contemporary epistemologists have tried to do. They've tried to say that beliefs with reasons, or maybe beliefs that have been produced by reliable methods, are just more stable. You won't lose them very soon, with all kinds of like minor counter evidence. And so they're more stable, and that means that they're more valuable. And I think that kind of works in the sense that like this kind of stability might be valuable, right? If you have beliefs that just pop in and out of existence in, almost randomly, depending on what you hear, that doesn't seem to be a very desirable state. Whereas if you have true beliefs that are sort of solid, that does seem to be a more reliable state. But it's not so clear that having good that this stability is, well, here's what I would like to say. It's not so clear that this stability of beliefs is always gained from something like having good arguments. And I think what's even less clear is that this stability of beliefs is only gained from having good arguments. And let me take the second point and use it to show why I think this entire story can't really work. And here's a nice way to phrase that. Charles Sanders Peirce, the American pragmatist philosopher, at some point, he doesn't really endorse this, but he suggests that one way to get beliefs is to just believe the first thing that pops up in your mind and then keep believing that no matter what. Okay, you just believe the first thing, when the first time you ask yourself a particular type of question like, are whales, can they fly? Yeah, sure, they can probably fly with that big tail. That's what you believe, and no matter what anyone says or whatever you see, just keep believing that. That seems very stable. right? That seems very stable. It's not because you've got any good arguments. It's just because you're a tenacious believer. It doesn't seem particularly good, right? So stability by itself doesn't seem particularly good. And you seem to be able to get it without having good arguments. So I don't think that stability can be sort of the magic goal or ingredient or quality that turns knowledge into something that is better than true belief. Right? If having good reasons is good, then it must be good because having good reasons is good and not because it makes things more stable. Because if it's good because it makes things more stable, then just being tenacious and never changing your mind is also good. And of course, that isn't good. Okay, so I don't really think that this story can work unless you make it work in the Plato way. So here's what I think Plato means. When Plato says that something only becomes knowledge once we have an account, what he seems to be thinking of is having an explanation or a story that is so strong that it proves with 100% certainty that the thing is so. Right? So Plato has an extremely demanding criterion for knowledge, which is one of the reasons why Plato is usually thought to believe that we can't really have knowledge about the things around us, right? I mean, that's the earthly realm is the realm of opinion. It's the realm of ideas. That's the realm of true knowledge. There we can have certainty. Now, that seems to be kind of desirable, right? The kind of stability that you get from 100% certainty, that seems kind of good. But I don't think we want to embrace this entire Platonic story, because if we can only have knowledge in cases of 100% certainty, we don't have a lot of knowledge, right? I mean, modern epistemologists usually don't want to follow Plato in saying that we can only have knowledge about supernatural forms or something like that. And so I don't think we really can, or most of us at least wouldn't want to follow Plato on this path, though I'm putting it out here as something that, if you're interested in that, you can try to think it through. Okay, so I don't think that stability is the magic word that will explain to us the value of knowledge. Well, here is my preferred story about why knowledge is more valuable than true belief. So I think that we should stop immediately trying to understand why having this true belief would be less good than knowing that little thing, right? Why it is better to know that the orange juice is in the fridge rather than to truly believe that the orange juice is in the fridge. We should take a step backwards, right? What is primarily valuable here, what is primarily valuable when we think of knowledge, is a certain project or quest, right? It's engaging in the project of knowledge, in the project of trying to get at the truth of the world. That is what is valuable, right? It is good for us human beings to earnestly strive for the truth. And if we do as well as we can in our earnestly striving for the truth, as best as we can, that's when we can have knowledge, right? And so if I just believe something on a whim, I'm not doing my earnest best in trying to achieve the truth, and it's not knowledge. And the problem with it is not a problem with this, believing that it's raining outside so much. Instrumentally speaking, for instance, that's perfect, right? You take the umbrella because you believe it's raining. Fine, you needed the umbrella. If I'm interested in espresso coffee, why care about the machine that made it? No, what's wrong with just believing something on a whim is that I'm giving up on the earnest search for truth. But that's what's valuable. I should be someone who earnestly searches for truth. And so knowledge is more valuable than mere belief, because a mere belief, a belief that isn't knowledge, a belief that fails, for instance, because I didn't care about reasons and I didn't think things through, well, that is me failing at an intrinsically valuable project. It's even me undermining that intrinsically valuable project maybe. Right? If I do this a lot, if I keep believing things for no good reason, then of course it's going to infect my real knowledge, and it's going to, make it more and more difficult for me to earnestly strive for the truth. So the way I would like to think about it is this. What is intrinsically valuable is this earnest striving for the truth. And mere knowledge, like knowledge that falls short of being a responsible step in the search for the truth, can be instrumentally valuable, but it's never intrinsically valuable. It doesn't have any intrinsic value. What has intrinsic value is primarily the project, my personal project, but I would like to say our social project, our shared project of trying to find the truth. And then in a sort of secondary way, the results of that, like the items of knowledge, the fact that we know certain things, we can call them intrinsically valuable too. But I would really like to say that they're only intrinsically valuable because they are part of this shared project that we have of knowing ourselves, knowing each other, and knowing the world. That's how I like to think about it, about the value of knowledge. There are many other positions, right? I mean, these are big debates, and as we go through this course, we're going to see a lot of big debates about which I can, present only 1, 2, 3, who knows, maybe 4 options, but not everything that's going on in the literature. This is an introductory course, and for all of these topics, if you want to know more, there's a lot of literature out there for you to explore. A good place to start might very often be the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, or an introduction to epistemology, like for instance the one that I use in my course is Duncan Pritchard's What is This Thing Called Knowledge? Very fine book. This is the 4th edition. I think there's a 5th edition released just a couple of weeks or months ago. That's a good place to start. And then there's a lot of sort of academic articles which might be a little bit harder to get your hands on if you're not enrolled in a university or research institute, but it's possible if you want to explore things in even more depth. So that's it for me in this 3rd video, and then starting with video 4, we will be looking into what is knowledge and these different analyses of the concept that have been given. Thank you.